A new student. The hallowed halls of the Galactic Military Academy had seen countless bright minds from a myriad of alien races pass through its gates, each leaving their mark on the annals of the galaxy's martial history. But today, an unusual buzz of anticipation and anxiety permeated the atmosphere. The Academy was about to receive its first student from the most notorious species in the known universe, a human. Professor Xyloth nervously adjusted his ceremonial robes, his chitinous appendages clicking together in a subconscious display of anxiety. As a veteran instructor of military strategy and diplomacy, he had always prided himself on his unflappable composure. But the imminent arrival of a creature whose mere existence had sent shockwaves through the galactic community had unnerved even him. The humans, or Deathworlders, as they were more commonly known, had only recently burst onto the interstellar scene. Their rapid advancement from a primitive warlike species confined to their own planet to a spacefaring civilization had caught the galaxy off guard. Stories of their resilience, ingenuity, and sheer audacity in the face of adversity had spread like wildfire, inspiring awe and terror in equal measure. And now one of these legendary beings was about to join his class. Cadet Jax, the first human to be admitted to the prestigious academy, had already garnered a reputation that preceded him. Rumors spoke of his people's casual approach to violence, their penchant for unorthodox tactics, and their seemingly insatiable desire for exploration and conquest. As Xyloth made his way to the grand auditorium, where the new students were to be welcomed, he couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. How would the other cadets, hailing from far more civilized and peace-loving races, react to the presence of a Deathworlder in their midst? Would Jax's influence corrupt the very foundation of the Academy's teachings? Lost in thought, Xyloth barely noticed when he arrived at the auditorium. The room was abuzz with excited chatter, as the new students eagerly awaited the commencement of their journey. Xyloth took his place on the stage, his eyes scanning the crowd for any sign of the human. A hush fell over the room as the Academy's headmaster, a wizened old Zargaxian, began his opening speech. Suddenly, the doors at the back of the auditorium burst open with a resounding bang. Every head turned to witness the entrance of a figure that seemed to emanate an aura of danger and unpredictability. Cadet Jax strode confidently down the aisle, his heavy boots echoing against the marble floor. He was tall and muscular, with a rugged, scarred face that spoke of countless battles fought and won. His eyes gleamed with a fierce intelligence and a hint of mischief. As Jax made his way to the front of the room, the other students instinctively parted to make way for him. Some looked upon him with fear, others with curiosity, but all were transfixed by his presence. Even the headmaster seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Jax came to a stop before the stage, his stance relaxed yet alert. He surveyed the room with a grin, as if amused by the effect his mere presence had on those around him. Then, without waiting for an invitation, he vaulted onto the stage in a single, fluid motion. "Sorry I'm late," he said, his voice a deep, rumbling baritone. "Had a little trouble with the airlock on my ship. Damn thing nearly turned me into a human popsicle." A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the auditorium, as the students struggled to process the human's casual irreverence. Xyloth cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "Welcome, Cadet Jax," he said, his voice betraying a slight tremor. "We are honored to have you join us here at the Galactic Military Academy. I trust you will find your time here both enlightening and challenging." Jax's grin widened. "Oh, I'm sure I will, Professor. In fact, I'm looking forward to sharing some of my own experiences with the class. You know, back on Earth, we have a saying, 'The best defense is a good offense.' I think you'll find that applies to more than just warfare." Xyloth felt a chill run down his spine at the human's words. He had a feeling that Cadet Jax's presence at the Academy would be anything but mundane. As the welcoming ceremony concluded and the students began to disperse, Xyloth couldn't shake the sense that the galaxy was about to be forever changed by the arrival of this lone human. Little did he know just how much chaos and enlightenment Jax would bring to the hallowed halls of the Galactic Military Academy. The stage was set for a clash of cultures, ideologies, and strategies that would redefine the very nature of galactic warfare. And at the center of it all stood one man, a Deathworlder, ready to show the galaxy the true meaning of human ingenuity and audacity. As Xyloth watched Jax mingle with the other students, his casual demeanor belying the coiled power beneath the surface, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held. One thing was certain: the Galactic Military Academy would never be the same again. Unorthodox tactics. Professor Xyloth stood before his class, his nervousness palpable as he prepared to begin the first lesson of the semester. The presence of Cadet Jax, the human Deathworlder, had already disrupted the usual calm of the academy, and Xyloth feared that the day's topic would only further inflame the situation. Today, Xyloth began, his voice quavering slightly, we will be discussing the fundamentals of galactic warfare, the strategies and tactics that have been honed over millennia to ensure the stability and peace of the galactic community. Jax, seated in the front row, leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing across his rugged features. Peace through superior firepower, eh? Sounds like my kind of party. A murmur of unease rippled through the classroom. The other students, hailing from races that had long since abandoned the ways of war, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Xyloth cleared his throat, pressing on with the lesson. The cornerstone of galactic warfare is the principle of minimum necessary force. We seek to resolve conflicts through diplomacy, resorting to military action only when all other options have been exhausted. And even then, our goal is to minimize casualties and collateral damage. Jax let out a low chuckle. Minimum necessary force. Where's the fun in that? Back on Earth, we have a different approach. We call it shock and awe. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and leave them 2 days to fight back. Xyloth's eye stalks twitched in consternation. But surely, Cadet Jax, you must see the value in preserving life and minimizing suffering. The galactic community has worked tirelessly to establish a framework for peaceful coexistence. The human shrugged, his eyes glinting with a hint of amusement. Don't get me wrong, Professor. I'm all for peace, but sometimes the only way to achieve peace is through superior firepower. You can't negotiate with a plasma cannon pointed at your face. The other students gasped in horror, their minds reeling at the thought of such blatant aggression. Xyloth, sensing the growing unease, tried to steer the conversation back on track. Let us move on to the topic of strategic planning. In galactic warfare, we prioritize the protection of civilian populations and the minimization of ecological damage. Our battle plans are carefully crafted to avoid unnecessary destruction. Jax leaned forward, his eyes alight with a fierce intensity. That's all well and good, Professor, but what about the element of surprise? The best battle plans are the ones that catch the enemy off guard. Like the time we dropped a kinetic rod on a Zorgaxian battlecruiser. They never saw it coming. The classroom erupted into chaos, with students clamoring for more details about the human's audacious claim. Xyloth, his composure rapidly eroding, struggled to regain control. Cadet Jax, I must insist that we focus on the established doctrines of galactic warfare. These tactics you speak of, they are barbaric. Jax's grin only widened. Barbaric, maybe, but effective. You see, Professor, the thing about humans is that we're survivors. We've had to fight for every scrap of resources, every inch of territory. And that's made us adaptable, unpredictable. We don't play by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. As the lesson progressed, Jax regaled the class with tales of human ingenuity and audacity in the face of overwhelming odds. He spoke of the time humanity had turned the tide of a war against a technologically superior race by unleashing a swarm of self-replicating nanobots that devoured their enemy's infrastructure from within. He described the use of psychological warfare, deploying propaganda and disinformation to sow chaos and confusion among the ranks of their foes. With each story, the other students grew more and more fascinated, their initial horror giving way to a reluctant admiration. Some even began to take notes, their eyes wide with wonder at the sheer scope of human ingenuity. Xyloth, for his part, could only watch in dismay as his carefully crafted lesson plan unraveled before his eyes. He had always prided himself on his ability to mold young minds, to instill in them the values of peace and diplomacy. But now, faced with the raw charisma and unapologetic boldness of the human cadet, he felt his own convictions wavering. As the class drew to a close, Jax stood up, his presence commanding the attention of every being in the room. I know our methods may seem harsh, even cruel, to those of you who have never known true adversity. But the universe is a dangerous place, and sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to fight for it with everything you've got. That's the human way. With those words, Jax strode out of the classroom, leaving behind a stunned silence in his wake. Xyloth slumped against his podium, his mind reeling with the implications of the human's words. He had always believed that the galactic community had evolved beyond the need for such primal tactics, but now he was no longer so sure. As the other students filed out of the room, their excited chatter filling the air, Xyloth couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed the beginning of a new era, an era in which the unorthodox tactics of the Deathworlders would reshape the very fabric of galactic warfare. And though the prospect filled him with trepidation, he couldn't help but feel a small spark of excitement at the thought of what the future might hold. Practical demonstration. The Galactic Military Academy's training grounds were a hive of activity as the students gathered for their first practical exercise of the semester. Professor Xyloth stood at the edge of the field, his heart heavy with apprehension. Today's lesson, orchestrated by none other than Cadet Jax, promised to be an experience unlike any the Academy had ever seen. Jax strode to the front of the assembled students, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "All right, listen up," he barked, his voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "Today we're going to put all that theory into practice. We're going to simulate a real-world conflict, and you're going to get a taste of what it's like to fight the human way." The students exchanged nervous glances, their minds still reeling from the tales of human warfare that Jax had shared in the classroom. Xyloth stepped forward, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed the human. "Cadet Jax, I must remind you that the Academy's training exercises are designed to simulate diplomatic solutions and strategic maneuvering. We do not condone the use of excessive force or underhanded tactics." Jax's grin only widened. "Relax, Professor. This isn't about excessive force. It's about thinking outside the box. It's about adapting to your enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them. And that's exactly what we're going to do today." With a nod to Xyloth, Jax began to divide the students into two teams. One team, led by the human himself, would play the role of the attackers. The other team, comprising the majority of the alien students, would act as the defenders. As the teams took their positions on opposite ends of the field, Jax huddled with his squad, his voice low and urgent. "All right, here's the plan. We're going to hit them hard and fast, but not in the way they expect. We're going to use their own preconceptions against them." The defenders, meanwhile, set about fortifying their position, erecting hastily constructed barriers, and setting up elaborate defensive formations. They were confident in their superior numbers and the strength of their traditional tactics. Xyloth watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and fascination. He had never seen a human in action before, and a part of him was morbidly curious to witness the legendary prowess of the Deathworlders firsthand. At Jax's signal, the attack began. But instead of the frontal assault that the defenders had anticipated, the human team seemed to melt into the surrounding terrain. They moved with a fluid grace, their bodies blending seamlessly with the shadows cast by the towering alien flora. The defenders, confused by the lack of a visible enemy, began to shift nervously in their positions. Suddenly, a series of explosions rocked the field, sending geysers of dirt and debris into the air. The defenders scrambled for cover, their formation quickly dissolving into chaos. From the smoke and dust emerged Jax's team, their weapons blazing with a ferocity that shocked the watching students. They moved with a primal efficiency, their movements honed by generations of warfare on the unforgiving battlefields of Earth. The defenders, caught off guard by the sheer speed and fury of the attack, quickly found themselves outflanked and outmaneuvered. Jax's team seemed to anticipate their every move, striking with a precision that bordered on the uncanny. As the simulation wore on, the human team's tactics grew ever more unorthodox. They used the environment to their advantage, luring the defenders into traps and ambushes. They employed psychological warfare, taunting and goading their opponents into making mistakes. The defenders, trained in the rigid doctrines of galactic warfare, found themselves woefully unprepared for the sheer unpredictability of the human approach. Their carefully planned strategies unraveled in the face of Jax's relentless onslaught. Xyloth watched in horrified fascination as the human team tore through the defenders' ranks, their movements a blur of speed and aggression. He had never seen such a display of raw, primal power before. It was as if the humans were tapping into some ancient primordial instinct, a legacy of their species' bloody history. In the end, the simulation was over almost before it had begun. The defenders lay scattered across the field, their weapons abandoned and their pride shattered. Jax's team stood victorious, their faces flushed with the thrill of battle. As the students regrouped, their minds struggling to process the sheer scope of what they had just witnessed, Jax addressed them once more. "You see," he said, his voice ringing with a fierce pride, "the human way isn't about brute force or mindless aggression. It's about adaptation, about using your enemy's weaknesses against them. It's about doing whatever it takes to survive, to protect your own." The students, their eyes wide with a newfound respect, and more than a little fear, nodded in stunned silence. Xyloth, his own mind reeling with the implications of the human's words, could only watch as Jax's influence seemed to grow with each passing moment. As the class dispersed, the students chattering excitedly among themselves, Xyloth couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed a turning point in the history of the galaxy. The human way, so long dismissed as the primitive ramblings of a backwater species, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. And as he watched Jax stride away, his head held high with the confidence of a born warrior, Xyloth couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the Deathworlders might hold. What other challenges might they pose to the established order of the galactic community? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: the Galactic Military Academy would never be the same again. The human cadet had opened a door to a new way of thinking, a new approach to the art of war. And whether the galaxy was ready for it or not, the human way had arrived. An ethical dilemma. In the weeks following the fateful training exercise, the Galactic Military Academy found itself abuzz with talk of the human cadet and his unorthodox tactics. Some students regarded Jax with a mix of awe and fear, while others openly admired his bold approach to warfare. Professor Xyloth, for his part, could only watch with growing unease as the human's influence seemed to spread like wildfire. But even as the Academy grappled with the implications of Jax's presence, a new crisis was brewing on the galactic stage. A rogue planet, long thought to be uninhabited, had suddenly emerged as a major threat to the peace and stability of the interstellar community. Intelligence reports spoke of a highly advanced civilization, one that had managed to conceal its existence from the rest of the galaxy for eons. Now, with their secret exposed, the inhabitants of this mysterious world seemed poised to lash out at their neighbors, their motives unknown, and their capabilities fearsome. As the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the crisis, the students of the Academy found themselves thrust into the heart of the action. They were tasked with developing a strategy to deal with the rogue planet, a challenge that would test their skills and their moral convictions in equal measure. Jax, unsurprisingly, was quick to offer his own solution. "It's simple," he said, his eyes glinting with a cold determination. "We hit them first, and we hit them hard. We take out their leadership, destroy their infrastructure, and leave them too crippled to fight back. The other students, raised in the traditions of galactic diplomacy, recoiled at the thought of such blatant aggression. Xyloth, his voice heavy with concern, tried to reason with the human. Cadet Jax, we cannot simply attack without provocation. The Galactic Council will never sanction such an action. We must seek a peaceful resolution, one that upholds the values of the interstellar community. Jax's lip curled in a sneer. Peaceful resolution, with an enemy that's been hiding from us for gods know how long. They've already proven that they can't be trusted. The only way to ensure the safety of the galaxy is to strike first, and strike hard. As the debate raged on, the students found themselves divided. Some, swayed by Jax's arguments, began to see the merits of a preemptive strike. Others, their moral compasses still firmly rooted in the principles of diplomacy, argued vehemently against such a course of action. Amidst the chaos, a small group of students approached Jax with a proposal. They had devised a plan, one that they believed could resolve the crisis without resorting to outright war. But the plan, they admitted, was not without its risks. We propose a false flag operation. The lead student, a brilliant young tactician from a race of insectoid warriors, explained. We will stage an attack on one of our own outposts, an attack that will be blamed on the rogue planet. This will give us the justification we need to take military action, without violating the principles of the Galactic Council. Jax, his interest piqued, leaned forward. Go on, he said, his voice low and eager. The student, emboldened by the human's attention, pressed on. We will use this attack as leverage to force the rogue planet to the negotiating table. With the threat of a full-scale war hanging over their heads, they will have no choice but to comply with our demands. Xyloth, overhearing the exchange, felt a chill run down his spine. The plan was audacious, brilliant even, but it was also deeply troubling. To stage an attack on their own people, to deceive the galaxy in such a way, it went against everything he believed in. But as he looked around at the faces of his students, at the fear and determination etched into their alien features, he realized that they were facing an impossible choice. To stand by and do nothing was to invite disaster, but to act in such a way was to compromise the very principles they had sworn to uphold. In the end, it was Jax who made the decision. We'll do it, he said, his voice ringing with a grim finality. We'll stage the attack, and we'll use it to bring the rogue planet to heel. It's the only way. The students, their faces a mix of relief and trepidation, set about putting their plan into motion. Xyloth, his heart heavy with misgivings, could only watch as the false flag operation unfolded. The attack, when it came, was swift and brutal. A small outpost on the fringes of galactic space, staffed by a skeleton crew of volunteers, was hit with a barrage of weapons fire. The destruction was total, the loss of life tragic. But even as the galaxy reeled from the news of the attack, the rogue planet found itself in the crosshairs of the Galactic Council. The evidence, carefully planted by Jax and his team, was damning. The mysterious civilization, it seemed, had finally shown its true colors. In the days that followed, the rogue planet, faced with the prospect of a full-scale war, capitulated to the demands of the Galactic Council. A tense peace settled over the galaxy, but it was a peace bought with deception and moral compromise. As the dust settled, Xyloth found himself haunted by the choices they had made. The false flag operation had been a success, but at what cost? Had they truly upheld the principles of the galactic community, or had they simply become the very thing they had sought to defeat? Jax, for his part, seemed untroubled by such moral quandaries. We did what we had to do, he said, his voice firm and unyielding. In a universe as vast and dangerous as this, sometimes you have to get your hands dirty to keep the peace. But even as the human cadet basked in the glow of his victory, Xyloth couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. The false flag operation had shown them the true nature of the human way, and it was a revelation that would haunt them for years to come. As the semester drew to a close, Xyloth found himself wondering what the future held for his students, for the academy, and for the galaxy as a whole. The human cadet had changed everything, and there was no going back. But even as he grappled with the weight of their choices, Xyloth knew one thing for certain: the lessons they had learned from Jax, the hard truths about survival and sacrifice in a hostile universe, would stay with them forever. And perhaps in the end, that was the true legacy of the human way. The human way. The false flag operation had been a success, but the cost had been high. The Galactic Military Academy, once a bastion of honor and integrity, found itself mired in a web of deceit and moral ambiguity. Professor Xyloth, his spirit weighed down by the choices they had made, could only watch as his students struggled to come to terms with the implications of their actions. Jax, the human cadet who had set them on this path, seemed untroubled by the moral quandaries that plagued his classmates. He moved through the halls of the academy with a swagger, his head held high and his eyes blazing with a fierce pride. But even as the other students whispered about the human's role in the false flag operation, Xyloth knew that the true burden of responsibility lay with him. He had allowed himself to be swayed by Jax's arguments, had let the humans' charisma and bold tactics blind him to the moral cost of their actions. As the semester drew to a close, Xyloth called a meeting of the Academy's senior staff. They gathered in a somber chamber, their faces etched with the weight of the decisions they had made. "We have crossed a line," Xyloth said, his voice heavy with regret. "In our desire to protect the galaxy, we have compromised the very principles we swore to uphold. We have become the thing we sought to destroy." The other professors, their own consciences haunted by the false flag operation, nodded in grim agreement. They spoke of the need for accountability, for a reckoning of the choices they had made. But even as they debated the way forward, a commotion erupted outside the chamber. The door burst open, and Jax strode in, his face a mask of defiance. "You're all missing the point," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, and sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. We did what we had to do to keep the peace, to protect our way of life." Xyloth, his eyes narrowing, stepped forward to confront the human. "But at what cost?" catted Jax. "We deceived the galaxy. We sacrificed our own people. How can we claim to be defenders of peace when we resort to such methods?" Jax's lip curled in a sneer. "Peace? You think the galaxy is at peace? Open your eyes, Professor. The universe is a harsh and unforgiving place, and the only way to survive is to be harsher and more unforgiving than your enemies." The other professors, their faces a mix of shock and anger, began to argue with the human. They spoke of the need for diplomacy, for a return to the principles that had guided the galactic community for eons. But Jax, his voice rising above the din, refused to back down. "Diplomacy is a luxury of the weak," he said, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. "The strong do what they must to survive, to protect their own. That is the human way, and it is the only way to truly keep the peace." Xyloth, his heart heavy with the weight of the human's words, could only shake his head in dismay. "The human way," he said, his voice a whisper. "Is this what we have become? Is this the legacy we want to leave for future generations?" The chamber fell silent, the weight of the professor's words hanging heavy in the air. The other professors, their own doubts and fears reflected in their alien features, could only stare at the human cadet who had so thoroughly upended their world. Jax, his face a mask of determination, met their gazes with a fierce defiance. "The legacy we leave will be one of survival," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "The galaxy will remember us as the ones who did what needed to be done, who made the hard choices to keep the peace." With that, the human cadet turned and strode from the chamber, leaving behind a stunned and uncertain academy. Xyloth, his mind reeling with the implications of the human's words, could only watch as his students, the future leaders of the galactic community, grappled with the choices they had made. In the weeks that followed, The Academy found itself at a crossroads. Some students, swayed by Jax's arguments, embraced the human way with a fervor that bordered on fanaticism. They spoke of the need for strength, for a willingness to do whatever it took to protect the galactic order. Others, their consciences still haunted by the false flag operation, argued for a return to the principles of diplomacy and peaceful coexistence. They spoke of the need for accountability, for a reckoning of the moral cost of their actions. In the end, it was Xyloth who found the middle ground. He spoke of the need for balance, for a recognition of the harsh realities of the universe, tempered by a commitment to the ideals that had guided the galactic community for so long. The human way, he said, his voice ringing with a quiet conviction, is not the only way. It is one path among many, and it is up to us to find the balance between strength and compassion, between pragmatism and principle. The Academy, its future uncertain, but its purpose renewed, set about the task of rebuilding. They would learn from the lessons of the human cadet, from the hard truths he had taught them about survival in a hostile universe. But they would also hold fast to the ideals that had guided them for so long, to the belief that peace and justice were worth fighting for, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the galaxy watched, the Galactic Military Academy emerged from the crisis stronger and wiser than before. They had been tested by the human way, had been forced to confront the darkness that lurked within their own hearts. But in the end, they had emerged victorious, their commitment to the principles of the galactic community unshaken. And as the students of the Academy took their place among the stars, they carried with them the lessons of the human cadet, tempered by the wisdom of their own experience. For the galaxy was a vast and wondrous place, full of danger and opportunity alike, and it would take all the strength and compassion of the galactic community to navigate the challenges that lay ahead. But with the lessons of the human way to guide them, and the principles of the Academy to light their path, the students of the Galactic Military Academy knew that they were ready for whatever the future might bring. They had been forged in the crucible of the human cadet's teachings, and they would carry his legacy with them to the stars.